The year is 2009, and you just bought this new intriguing game called Borderlands. You bought it because in a world where first-person shooters like Call of Duty and Halo are king, Borderlands promised to do something completely different with the genre. Combine it with an RPG. And it claims to have 87 bazillion guns too, which is completely crazy. So, you pop it into your Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3 and see what this game is all about. When you first start playing, you're blown away. The game has an incredible atmosphere, a unique art style, and skill trees like you'd expect to find in Diablo or World of Warcraft. And those 87 bazillion guns come with some cool elemental effects that make them feel distinct from the other first-person shooters you've played. But as you progress, you start to realize that while the campaign includes some fun and quirky characters, there isn't much to it. You're guided by one simple principle that keeps you motivated. Open the vault. The vault is said to possess untold riches, and you can't help but wonder what kind of awesome loot it will reward you with when your long journey comes to a conclusion. As the end approaches, you experience the climactic chaos of alien protectors clashing against the Crimson Lands, and you feel this game building up to something spectacular. This is it, the big payoff. Soon, you'll be swimming in loot. Then you open the vault and defeat the destroyer. Your guardian angel congratulates you for besting an alien whose purpose is lacking any real context, and you're presented with a meager 7 red chests. You're left with one thought. That's it? This was a general consensus back in 2009. Most critics and players found the story lacking and the ending extremely disappointing. And to make matters worse, once you beat Borderlands, there wasn't really anything to do besides the odd side quest you didn't initially complete. And sure, maybe you could try to farm legendary guns, but all of them were world drops, so your best bet was to just repeatedly beat random enemies or open chests until you found one. Your only other option was to experience the same lackluster story all over again with either the Playthrough 2 feature or another class. And that was pretty much it. So, all in all, base game Borderlands was fun, but incredibly flawed. It played more like a proof of concept rather than a complete game. And while the game did succeed in proving the looter-shooter formula worked, there was still so much untapped potential. Borderlands was good, but could it be more? Could Borderlands be great? Luckily, gamers didn't have to wait long for new content. Shortly before the release of Borderlands, Gearbox announced the Zombie Island of Dr. Ned, which dropped about a month after the base game. The DLC was generally well received by fans and critics, but ultimately, part of its positive reception was due to excitement that Borderlands was getting DLC and updates at all. In hindsight, the DLC isn't much to write home about. It added some much-needed enemy variety and gave fans a fun story, but for $10 it was a little bit skimpy on content. It only lasted about 3 to 5 hours and didn't introduce any gameplay upgrades or new loot. The DLC also played it extremely safe. Its release came at a time where zombies were hitting peak mainstream popularity, with horror movies such as Dawn of the Dead, 28 Days Later, and their parodies like Shaun of the Dead and Zombieland being box office successes. Zombie fever was also trendy with gaming, with games like Resident Evil 4, Plants vs. Zombies, Left 4 Dead, and Call of Duty World at War being critically acclaimed. Point being, Gearbox wasn't exactly reinventing the wheel by creating a zombie-themed DLC. On top of that, the DLC made it clear in its opening cutscene that the events were considered questionably canon. So, while the story was a silly diversion, Gearbox hinted there would be no lasting repercussions to the Borderlands universe. Long story short, the Zombie Island of Dr. Ned was a lot of fun, and a great way for Gearbox to get their DLC feet wet, but ultimately it didn't push the boundaries of what Borderlands could be. Unfortunately, the next DLC was Mad Moxxi's Underdome Riot. The tediously repetitive gameplay and near-complete absence of a story gave it a mixed reception. But thankfully, shortly after the holidays, Gearbox announced their next DLC, which they promised would be the largest Borderlands DLC to date: the Secret Armory of General Knoxx. And despite making such a bold proclamation, Gearbox delivered. This DLC would go on to change the Borderlands series as we know it. So what made the Secret Armory of General Knoxx so special? Well, pretty much everything. Perhaps the most hotly anticipated change was the level cap increase, which brought the max level from 50 to 61. Gearbox knew fans would be excited for this and advertised accordingly. The promotional material for the DLC would lean into the hype by frequently referencing Spinal Tap's Turn It Up to 11 joke, which more or less became one of the official marketing slogans. The change gave people a reason to touch their max characters again, and also let people have just enough skill points for 3 capstone skills, even if they didn't play Moxxi's Underdome. The increased build diversity alone would have made General Knoxx a triumph, but I think it's important to highlight how Gearbox's promotional campaign showcased their growing comfort with their comedic chops. In addition to leaning into the unorthodox level upgrade, Borderlands started teasing the DLC's titular villain, General Knoxx, with Twitter posts that showed off his sour disposition. Meanwhile, Gearbox developers would give insight into the game through forum posts and interviews. The down-to-earth vibes and clever marketing wasn't just getting people to buy the DLC, it started fundamentally changing how people thought of the franchise. Borderlands was gaining the reputation of simply being a good time. But this clever marketing wasn't the only way Gearbox showcased their wit. The secret armory of General Knoxx itself was where Borderlands' humor really came into its own. The base game undoubtedly had its comedic moments, like the infamous Nine Toes splash screen, Claptrap's dancing, and Tannis' wacky commentary, but they always felt like random quips thrown in there rather than a focal point of the series. A sort of disorganized chaos, if you will. With General Knoxx, Gearbox were all in. From the very opening, the DLC is laugh-out-loud hilarious, with Atlas's corporate propaganda depicting themselves as saviors and the Vault Hunters and their allies as savages. And it's done so goofily, with ridiculous footage like this. And then right after this presentation, you meet up with Scooter, and he immediately makes you understand Athena's reluctance at needing to rely on him. Then, a few minutes later, we meet General Knoxx himself, whose very first line is a dramatic sigh, followed by jaded complaints about his job. It might be the funniest opening 15 minutes in Borderlands history. Later on in the story, there's this gag.
Do you ever feel like you are just firing blanks? Do the ladies in your life find your gun a little short on firepower? You need Engorge by Atlas. Engorge will have you firing on all...
I've managed to use some of Scooter's equipment to mask my signal inside a promotion for a male enhancement product.
Engorge!
It'll be safe for us to communicate by Echo now. Athena out.
Along with silly jokes about Moxxi's ex-husband. It's pretty much banger after banger. Even the little things, like the dialogue you hear from Atlas drones while you pass by ridiculous exit signs on the highway, makes for a fantastically playful atmosphere. Gearbox just fully embraced the absurdist tone that the series is known for today. And yet, despite that, there's this touch of darkness that balances everything out perfectly. Knoxx's impersonal detachment, while mostly funny, can also be downright menacing when he's cavalier about sending you to the afterlife. Meanwhile, Athena's vendetta against Atlas feels very personal. It's revealed that Atlas tricked her into destroying the town her sister lived in, and thus her sister herself. In light of all this information, it's clear that Atlas is a threat to your existence and should be taken seriously. Despite this, nothing comes across as melodramatic. The game finds a perfectly delicate balance of absurd humor and drama. The DLC was also the first time Borderlands had a straightforward antagonist. Yes, we had Steel and Dr. Ned, but they serve different roles. Commandant Steel barely talks to you. She pops in at random intervals and then just dies. There's no final showdown or anything. General Knoxx himself actually pokes fun at this by roasting Steel a few times, and it makes the initial letdown kind of worth it. But I digress. The other villain was Dr. Ned, but he isn't established as a true antagonist until about halfway into the DLC. Knoxx is the first villain that regularly interacts with you and threatens you. Yet, as more of his backstory is revealed, you begin to feel a bit sorry for him, as you realize why he's the way he is. Knoxx can somehow make you amused, scared, and sympathetic all at the same time. It's the first time there's an actually well-written, morally complex bad guy for your character to serve as a foil against. And your journey and constant clashing culminates into one epic battle with the ultimate reward, which brings me to my next point of discussion. Gameplay. Improved writing can only get you so far if the gameplay is lacking, but luckily Gearbox succeeded on this front as well. In addition to a level cap increase, Knoxx brought new enemies, 3 new vehicles, and of course, new loot. The enemies ranged from acrobatic ninjas to jetpackers to enormous spiders to Gundam-esque mech suits, to a very special boss, which I'll get to in a moment. The vehicles included the Armored Monster, the Lancer, a vehicle capable of holding 4 players, and more importantly, the Racer, which was the fastest vehicle in the game. The vehicles weren't the biggest selling point, but they highlighted the scale of General Knoxx. Previously, Pandora had felt somewhat compact since most areas were traversed on foot and separated by loading screens. With General Knoxx, as you drove the long highways, you were accompanied by scenic vistas that made you feel like there was still much of Pandora left to explore. And sure, the environments weren't abundant in detail, but they had the desired effect. If there's anything Borderlands excelled at, it was creating an atmosphere, and the DLC continued to deliver on that front. More importantly, General Knoxx completely upgraded the loot. Base game Borderlands had 49 legendaries, and all of them were guns. Knoxx upped the amount of legendaries to 52 by adding 3 legendaries under the Iridian manufacturer, which previously had no legendaries at all. But more notably, Knoxx added the new ultra-rare pearlescent rarity, which added 9 guns with unique effects, and, for the first time ever, 3 shields. So, unlike the previous DLCs, players now had new loot to hunt. And what made it even better was how you could hunt it. Like I said earlier, base game Borderlands had no dedicated drops. Knoxx fixed this by making certain enemy types drop the items, and of course, the new Crimson Lance chests. And what better way to access these new chests than opening the Crimson Armory? You see, while the vault in Borderlands was a big nothing burger, the greatest triumph of the secret armory of General Knoxx was that it finally delivered on the original promise of base game Borderlands, by letting you open a treasure vault. And unlike base game Borderlands, the build up to it is more organized. All the resentment you hear building up in Knoxx's echo logs, all of the times you're talked down to by Atlas Corporate, and all of the attempted assassinations culminate into one epic final battle. Except this time, it's against an antagonist you've developed a relationship with rather than an alien you've never met. And you're actually rewarded for it. In many ways, it's a big do-over of the main story, and this time, it's done right. The first time you raid the vault, you're frantically scrambling to grab as much loot as you can before the armory explodes. But what made the DLC infinitely more exciting is that players quickly discovered you could actually glitch into the armory, which meant you could take your time looting as many chests as you wanted as long as you defeated Knoxx again. And even more importantly, the game would normally only allow you to loot the armory 3 times, but this glitch let you do it an unlimited number of times. Gearbox did the best thing they could ever have done, which was leave the glitch in the game. This meant you effectively had endless replay value as long as you wanted to keep farming rare weapons. And when you're meandering around this big vault with no time restrictions, you realize how much detail this armory actually has. It has 4 whole floors and multiple hidden chests you can only get through parkouring. It actually lived up to the legend of the vault in the intro cutscene. I spent hours loading the game up, driving to General Knoxx, and looting as much as I could from the armory. The excitement of opening 126 chests never wore off. But what good is loot if you have nowhere to use it? Luckily in this DLC, you do. In another advancement for the series, General Knoxx introduced Borderlands' first raid boss, Crimson the Invincible. All that gear you spent hours farming, you could use it here. And to make matters better, Crimson itself would drop its own rare loot to make it worth your while. Beating Crimson was considered the hardest challenge in Borderlands at the time, the ultimate test of your skills and gear. Or you could also hide like a coward and cheese the boss, which Gearbox also left in the game. Either way, Borderlands finally had an endgame loop that would keep players around for hours after the story's conclusion. And if you did want to replay the story again, it was finally good. Nowadays, many players still regard General Knoxx very highly, but not many regard it as the greatest DLC of all time. The most popular choices are usually Claptastic Voyage or Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep. To be honest, those are probably the objectively correct choices from a pure enjoyment perspective. There are admittedly aspects of General Knoxx that haven't aged well. Mostly it's a lack of fast travel points or being part of Borderlands 1, which I think we can all agree is pretty janky at times. And unfortunately, those vehicles that they used as a selling point are attached to Borderlands 1 physics, which leads to a lot of frustrating moments like these. But even if the Secret Armory of General Knoxx isn't the best Borderlands DLC of all time, it is indisputably the most important for the series. That is a hill I will die on. Knoxx corrected the mistakes of the original game and won back a lot of goodwill with fans by letting players actually open a vault. It also proved that Borderlands was actually capable of delivering a compelling story that could balance world building, absurd humor, and serious stakes. Lastly, it introduced series staple features like elevated rarities, dedicated drops, and endgame raid bosses. It became the blueprint that made the Borderlands series what it is today. Now, remember when I mentioned earlier that the megacorporation Atlas depicted themselves as the heroes who would save Pandora from the Vault Hunter savages? Or what about when I said Knoxx was an odd mix of sympathetic, amusing, and scary? These descriptions might remind you of a certain popular Borderlands character. Yep, I'm talking about the golden child of the Borderlands series, Handsome Jack. When I make this comparison, you can see how the Secret Army of General Knoxx was in many ways a prototype for Borderlands 2. If Knoxx hadn't been a success, Borderlands 2 wouldn't be the classic game that it is today, and nor would Handsome Jack be one of the most iconic villains in video game history. And if Knoxx's Engorged jokes never panned out, there would never be crazy silly quest lines like, shoot this guy in the face. There also wouldn't be fantastic endgame loops like facing Vermivorous the Invincible, there wouldn't be much lore for weapons manufacturers in the corporate wars, and there wouldn't be Athena's voice of reason in the pre-sequel, nor her influence on characters in Tales from the Borderlands, which many people consider the peak of Borderlands storytelling. The ripple effect that this DLC has on the series is huge. So, now there's a piece of the Secret Armory of General Knoxx in every Borderlands game since its release. In conclusion, Borderlands was a good game. It created the looter-shooter genre and proved the concept could work, but it was too flawed to be considered a complete or polished game. The Secret Army of General Knoxx is the moment that Borderlands became great. It was so good that it became the template Gearbox used for all Borderlands projects moving forward. If you experienced an epic moment in the Borderlands series since 2010, you can thank this DLC. General Knoxx is the DLC that made Borderlands. That's all for now. If you're still here and enjoyed my ramblings, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Otherwise, you'll be impaled by your next plate of calamari. But seriously, thank you so much for watching my lengthy video. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.